arid climate, which we have to contend with daily. I mean, many of us, many times we've been asked about how can we make better informed decisions on the advantages and disadvantages for the parameters, whichever route it may be that we take on each specific project of whatever scale in the market and the business environment that we do work in here in the GCC. It can be quite unique at times. And it continues to evolve, constantly grow, and is of course renowned for launching mega, if not giga projects, as we've seen in the last few weeks, in response to our own rapid urbanization and growth that we've seen here in the very, very recent past. I think it's key that we look at it and focus from a regional points perspective and have the opportunity to bring in experts, industry experts from across the world who can explain to us and advise us and show us how they have dealt with projects in the region of whatever scale and size. I mean, rapid urbanization is something which the United Nations expects that we will all witness globally over the coming next generation or so. And to deal with projected population growth at the scale that they're discussing, it will take a great deal of more towns and city developments across the world for people to expand into. And we need to, our intention through this series is to show the practicalities of working within rapid urban transformations, rapid urbanization, what challenges we have faced, what challenges others will face that they can take from us, what lessons we've learned, and how we can look to put these lessons into our next projects and future projects as we build and build to adapt to the growing urbanization needs that we see here in the region and we'll see in the world. The key, I think, the key look at is the sustainability aspect of it, Andy.
Yeah, I think we felt there was a lot of information out there and a lot of discussion, but we were keen to have something really focused on the region, and especially the second one. We've really looked for key regional projects that are in the region and dealing with the climate here, the constraints you have here, but also the opportunities. And I thought it was important to kind of really look at them and share them with other people. So that's the purpose of today for and how we got here. And I hope everybody's come, they're very interested in learning about this. I think we can get ready to start. We're moving up to 5 past 5. Quite a lot of people in the room are ready. We can get ready for Simon to take over.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I mean, it is very important that we do have this kind of forum available to us where we can exchange knowledge on skills and understanding that we need.
Yeah, I think just before we get going, I'll pass on a couple important messages. So one, yes, we hope we can all be meeting again in person when it's safer to do so later this year, and be great to have these kind of discussions in person. And you're all welcome to get in touch and suggest events, or wherever region you're in, we may have a representative who can help do that. And I'll put some contact details for digital contact for now. And yeah, in this talk now, so please put in the Q&A questions, and then we'll collate them at the end for asking, and if ideally you can ask them yourself on screen. Okay, well, I think Simon, if you're ready to go, thank you for joining us from UK, and we'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you today, wherever you are around the world. And this is a subject close to my heart. I lived in Doha, Qatar for 3 years during the evolution and delivery of this project, of which there's much to say. And today I'll try and give you a brief overview of the project, but also home in on the aspects pertinent to the subject today, sustainability, and the drive that is in motion globally to make our urban places and our buildings more sustainable. I'll talk you through the idea behind the project, the master plan, the infrastructure that supports it, and the standards that framed how everybody engaged with the project. And through that, explain showing you some of the built examples, how different buildings in the project, mostly Allies and Morrison buildings, although we're one of many architects, saw those through in real terms. And it's fair to say at this point that Msheireb is partially inhabited right now. It's on its way to welcoming all the inhabitants and all the businesses to the district, but it's yet to be completed. Phase 4 is still underway, as it's has the complexity of its interface with the Doha Metro, another really important sustainable initiative within Qatar. But is nevertheless now open for walking, and has a thriving street life and public life, which we're very excited about already. So let's open the curtains, and we're looking out over part of Msheireb towards West Bay in the background. And this serves as a contrast in a way between the model that Msheireb Properties, a subsidiary of Qatar Foundation, had in mind as a vision for Msheireb, which was something quite different from what was happening in parallel in West Bay, a neighborhood of towers with quite a different agenda. And I think to start, I'd just like to outline the way in which the project was taken forward. Under the client was the master plan team, Arup, Edor, and ourselves, Allies and Morrison. And the project was taken forward by Time Qatar, the project managers and design managers. And then the project was formed of a group of design architects, primarily from London, public realm team, and executive architects who responsible for delivering the buildings on site and seeing through the supervision, and supported by, of course, a significant engineering team, both locally and in the UK. So the governing idea, I would say, for Msheireb is essentially that it's a regeneration project. This is a place where things were already going on. It's in the city centre. This is not an expansion of a Gulf city. And I think at the time, actually, that was quite a radical and different thing to do, to look at the core of your city rather than building a new piece on the edge. And in that way, I think is innovative in setting a paradigm for other cities to take forward and learn from. This is the map in 2007 when we were really working in earnest on the master plan, and it shows the Msheireb site in orange next to effectively the yellow shape, which was what Doha was in the early part of the 20th century, with a completely different coastline. And of course, it has since expanded rapidly. It really has been one of these cities undergoing massive transformation year on year. And even between when I was living there, which was the era of the roundabouts, and what it's like today, which is the era of the intersections and multi-lane highways, it keeps changing, and the World Cup is coming forward soon. So all different waves of rapid growth and change. But in a way, the Msheireb project was founded on a look backwards as well as a look forwards. And in that sense, it sought to pause for a minute and say, what is it that we can learn from the past? And I would include in that the way in which one relates to the climate and the environment, very hot, arid, and sometimes humid environment in Doha, as well as then how does one respond to that in a modern way? How does one set forward a new kind of architecture that feels at home in this historic city centre? Because the neighbourhood was not hugely fit for purpose, a lot of the buildings were starting to become dilapidated. The Qatar Foundation took a step to instigate this major project. And it was based on an idea that it could be a counterpart or an antidote to the kind of sprawl and suburban living that the diagram on the left kind of sums up, where everything you did was relied on getting in your car, and every experience seemed to be from one air-conditioned environment to the next, where there was a kind of a loss of enjoyment in the outside and a loss of enjoyment in having a sense of a social dimension, which even with the traditional customs of the city was still had a pent-up demand really for people to have a public life. So the model that we took forward is on the right, a mixed use integrated community where walking is promoted and public transport's offered, so that you could live, work, play, or visit as a tourist and engage, visit as a local in the evenings or at the weekends, to one place and really find everything you might want there as part of a sort of community within the wider city. And the contrast that we really found was most apparent when we visited Souk Waqif, the wonderful reconstruction of the souk in the old part of Doha, which is adjacent to the Msheireb site, and it really inspired the team with its the way it created buildings that responded to the heat, places to walk and to shelter, and using the tops of the buildings. And it just had such a completely different feel, where people were able to be outside and enjoy the times of the year and the times of the day that were possible to be outside. And that's continued to flourish and is now expanded by the Msheireb project. Very much not the image on the left, but as in our very earliest work, we tried to put forward how could a place that was both contemporary and related to its history and its historic neighbor take place here in the city center. So as it were, the old model on top and the new model below, making use of the sea breezes, using buildings to create places and public realm and streets that were habitable for people, enjoyable for people to be in, so that we could really enjoy being in the heart of the city, and even consider moving ourselves to live in the heart of the city here in Qatar. This was then a very intense period of years where the local team and the consultant teams collaborated and brought forward the designs. You know, at every level, really, there was a very hands-on approach by Msheireb Properties to make this a very special project. And one of the first things we did as architects was design a visitor center, which was moored on the Corniche, and it tested and put into practice some of the ideas we were developing in the master plan and the standards that would underpin that master plan, being outside, using shade, creating different heavyweight and lightweight elements that resonated with the traditional architecture, but were made in contemporary ways and performed with contemporary standards. So the way I wanted to describe the master plan today is traditional urbanism, perhaps served by integrated systems. In other words, it's a fusion of timeless lessons that we learned from looking in the region and looking in Qatar in particular, and then bringing engineering ideas, architectural ideas to that. So the master plan is a tight-knit urban fabric. It's a hybrid, if you like, between traditional Islamic street patterns and very narrow lanes with a contemporary, not a contemporary, but let's say a grid system. So there's a sense of the courtyard at different scales, the courtyard at the micro scale and at the larger scale at the center of blocks. And you can see how from north to south and from right to left, it evolves from that traditional fabric into a more familiar perimeter block fabric. And this allowed a range of different building footprints and building types to cluster in different ways around the pedestrian network. And really there were only sort of a handful of major streets within the master plan that the traffic would flow through. And we'll talk about how we achieved that in a minute. So this hybrid of the lattice of pedestrian lanes and the grid of connecting routes and services had an above ground and a below ground dimension, which we'll talk about in a minute. But in terms of what is Msheireb, it's 31 hectares of land, over 100 buildings, They vary in height between 3 and 30 stories. And it's set upon an integrated basement, multi-level basement, which serves the world above, and also provides space for a lot of cars, because this is a city in transition. It's only just received its first metro service, and this will it'll take time for adjustments in public transport, and there'll always be a place for some private transport. There are a number of special buildings here, which I won't go into, but you can see this is a district of some substance, over 2,000 residents and 20,000 jobs right here in the city centre. And as we developed the project with the master plan team, one of our roles as the architectural voice of the master plan was in visualizing and developing the massing, which partly has an alignment to the sea breezes, but also rises in scale from the side of the Msheireb 1 and the waterfront in towards the city, and actually concentrating development at the metro station at the southwest corner, as well as transitioning on this left side to the traditional souk. And as part of the master plan work, we worked a lot on streets, on public spaces and streets, and the street sections, and the way in which comfort for pedestrians in public places took a very front role in the development of the master plan and the standards that supported it. And what that then brought about in a whole range of different projects over phases 1 to 4 was the ability for each architect to intensify that ethos and bring it forward in different pockets across the site. And this is an example of one of our plans at concept stage of the townhouses and apartments just north of the main square, which taps into traditional ideas of clustering homes around for each, and each home is in fact its own courtyard house. So we have a whole sort of layering of open space with public space and private spaces, enabling a range of sort of shading opportunities as well from that tightness and proportion. And the architecture of the buildings was strongly inspired and driven by an attitude to the way the Qatari vernacular operated. And we found in the research we did throughout the country to see what was left and to look closely at that, we felt that there was a family of architecture. It was quite stripped back and simple and beautiful in that way. There was a limited palette and a sense of knowing what it's about, and that of course comes from working with the materials and the climate that were given to the country, and the need to make something from those limited resources. And we developed with the client a series of 7 principles known as the 7 steps to the project teams, which underpinned the approach of the project. Continuity, space and form, streets, home, design for climate, individual and collective and architectural language. And they all played a role actually in making it a place that would be, we feel, loved in the long term. So continuity meant that we were incorporating some really important historic courtyard houses and embedding the project in the city. Space and form, often about how to respond to the climate and bring buildings close together whilst respecting privacy. The importance of streets and of the public realm. Creating a sense of home in the heart of the city, and this is where the courtyards played a very big role, and the way in which buildings can be individual and feel personal to you, as well as be part of something that's common to all. Designing for climate. So this is a project with many colonnades, many buildings contributing to the walkability of the streetscape. And then places where buildings form edges to spaces where there's all sorts of opportunities already being used for public life. And then this is underpinned by an architectural language, a particular one to this particular place, which of course, goes hand in hand with the sustainability goals, but also would vary if this was in a different city or a different part of the world. This language would be completely different. And for us, it was an exciting project to be involved in because it also resonates with our own sustainability principles as a practice, which we feel, that really what matters most is the deep rootedness of these of what we're doing, and the technology is there to serve that. So the bits you don't see of the project, there's so much going on underground. I've just highlighted the two service corridors here that move between the phases of the project. And in between these corridors, which track the main streets of the project, are the big car parks pocketed down into the basement. So in the background are our phase 1 government buildings, National Archive, and Guards and Diwan Annex building underway. And you can also see our cooling tower enclosure, our cooling tower before the enclosure we designed being constructed over there. And Arup led this strategy for the service corridors and below ground parking as part of a kind of layered approach that enabled the ground level of Msheireb to be so pedestrian prioritized and walkable and delightful to be in. And this shows a cross section of one of those service corridors, along with some happy engineers who were down in the basement where they felt most at ease with the world. And this multi-service corridor where not only the utilities were organized, but also deliveries and distribution of deliveries from shared service yards to individual buildings took place. So this district approach to infrastructure drives, underpins the sustainability of the buildings and obviously drives the project as a whole. And that was further embedded in master development standards, which went across engineering and architectural disciplines through landscape and so on. LEED was adopted by the client, although there is now also another system, GSAS in Qatar, to do a similar job. But basically the benchmark was set very high, and platinum and gold became the targets for all buildings in Msheireb, along with some initiatives on the right, more specific initiatives. So the standards really focus architecturally in architectural terms on climate responsiveness, how much can be done in a fabric first way, a passive way through design to minimize energy use and maximize comfort and the experience of users. And I think this is another diagram that we use to reinforce the point that so much can be done to impact sustainability early in design, so that the increased activity period is that which the client is putting into defining its goals, that designers are putting into the early stages of projects to make sure that all the fundamentals are in place. And if they are, then most benefit will be reaped from that effort, because the ability to impact it diminishes as the construction process goes on, as well as the cost. So as I said, that we've now seen a number of LEED and Gold buildings come through. The majority are already assessed and established, and there's a whole range of initiatives in the standards that embed this, which I won't go through in detail now, but I'd like to just show you a few images that you'll see features that really have been part of the design to deliver these goals on the right-hand side of the image there. So looking out over some of our buildings in phase 2, you can see in the public realm, there's the electric tram line, and that tram ties together the Doha metro station with the rest of the project, and creates not only a sort of low energy, electric, clean way of getting around the project, but also is there to take part in the street life and act as a sort of last half, 200 meters of people's journeys before getting out and walking. As you can see, the rooftops are, there's a lot going on the rooftops. The plant needed up there is diminished because you're getting so much through the district cooling underground and the integrated waste systems, for example. So a lot of the need for rooftop plant is taken away. That gives us more space for PVs and hot water, but also for habitable spaces on the rooftops. And on the right, you can see our district cooling plant. There's 2 district cooling towers integrated right in the thick of this project. And what we found fascinating was that that they can be incorporated even in the most precious environments. So here, it's next to one of the wonderful mosques. There are 3 mosques in the project, and it absolutely takes its place there against the mosque and the museum, and contributes to the streetscape. We're going to just dive down to street level in a second, and this also gives you another overview of the project. Some of the buildings that we worked on there, offices, mixed-use buildings, a prayer ground, and all of these in effect integrate and with the basement infrastructure. They all play a role in tidying away the ventilation ducts, in integrating escape stairs, integrating access points between the basement, car parks, and the district. So every building is doing its job to make sure that the spaces between are then as free and uncluttered as possible. And we'll also look at a project by Michel Mosessian, Al Baraha, which is the main square in the project. Each of these images, I've just called out a theme, and I'll go through them very quickly before we wrap up. And so this one is one of the Farij townhouses clustered around a courtyard, and this enables us to create a microclimate. And you'll see some overhanging elements in some of the projects, and very often these are there along with the shades on the windows to cast shade on the facade, but also to create shaded spaces beneath. And here the water and the foliage is contributing to that microclimate. Inside these houses are courtyards that allow the house to look inwards and gain diffused light within the house. But this is also controllable. So we have lots of moving elements, sliding and pivoting shutters. Narrow lanes in between these Farij make it a very cool experience, as cool as it can be in the hot months. And this is Caribou Street with its special lighting, but also this is a street of overhangs. So the buildings here create shaded pools for people to walk between, a bit in the way that the old buildings used to on Caribou Street with their projecting signage. Desert planting is part of obviously the water strategy. It's very carefully tuned water strategy to minimize the amount of water we're using, but also make an efficient irrigation system here. And you can see how the narrowness of these street lanes between the traditional buildings and the sidra trees and this kind of granularity creates a wonderful environment that really resonates with the landscape of Qatar. And so the trees play a role in the shade. Every tree needed to be part of effectively the roof, integrated in the roof design of the basement, because every tree has a tree pit for its roots. So every opportunity we took to pocket in one of these tree pits, we took. The colonnades, a number of the streets have continuous colonnades, and these spaces stitch together the project. Here's the tram in the street, part of the streetscape, part of a walkable public realm. And occasionally buildings interconnect. They're always interconnecting at basement level, but occasionally here, in the case of the retail galleria, there's an overhead connection. which also gives us shade below, so some win-wins. And of course, the performance of the facades, and we believe, through the layering of the facades, through the careful use of recessing and then placed components within those panels, we were able to create quite highly engineered and tested solutions that mean that people have a lovely internal experience, but also it delivers what it needs to within the language, bridging between traditional and contemporary buildings. And at the heart of the project is a very special space, special environmentally, as well as socially and in the cultural life of Qatar. This is shaded, albeit this photo was taken at night, by a huge retracting canopy. And the adjacent cafes all have measures which contain cool air, a small amount of cool air with the canopies and their enclosures to contain that and make it cool, even in the hottest months. And back to our cooling tower, to us, in a way, this is symbolic of how engineering and systems can have an architectural resolution as infrastructure, as architecture in the city, and delighted by the way in which it takes its place amongst the buildings of Msheireb. So to conclude, we feel that Msheireb allows architects and through a dialogue with local people to create a place that might be, we feel timeless and long lasting. And actually it's in that longevity that a lot of the benefit sustainability wise will come forth here at Msheireb. And as if with a film, I'd like to roll the credits just to remind you of the people involved. This was a work of many hands, which for us, of course, is a pleasure to present to you today. And finally, in 2006, this was as the sort of master plan thinking was starting to emerge. There's a kind of a fine grain something in the foreground, which was what we felt Msheireb might be at the time, with the bay in the background. And today, or in 2018, in fact, this is what we have, a district taking shape through the regeneration of a city centre site here in the Gulf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's fantastic to see the regeneration project and the quality that you've achieved on such a scale. Very exciting project to look at. Thank you so much. And now we will invite our next speaker, Farnaz, who is the chair of the local SIBSI chapter here in the UAE. And Farah today will show us, through demonstrating the Bureau Happold's sustainability consultant's perspective on the Zaha Hadid BIHA headquarters in Sharjah. Please, Farah, as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Sandra. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's brilliant to be here and have these conversations. So first, I would like to introduce myself so you know where I'm coming from. So I am a building services engineer. I worked in 4 different continents, starting from America, UK, Southeast Asia, and now in UAE. And I head up sustainability and innovative solutions for Bureau Happold Engineering. I'm also in the process of writing a book about incorporating inclusive, integrated innovation and sustainability in Arab cities. Just to give you a bit of a glimpse about the different projects I've worked on. One on the right-hand side is Sustainability Pavilion, via headquarters, Abu Dhabi, Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, currently Museum of the Future, MASDAR, and NEOM. And today, to formulate the conversation, I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about my own net zero projects journey, which started in 2008, and then give you an overview of what's happening in United Arab Emirates in terms of net zero and the conversation and the progression towards a net zero roadmap for Middle East. And then lastly, talk about BIA headquarters, which aims to become net zero in operation. So on the screen, you will see a project named Ashmont Primary School. It's based in London. The architects were Pinner and Prasad Architects. And at that time in 2008, when I started working on this project, I was a young engineer doing the energy modeling of a combined district heating system. The school is on the left. There is a nursery and an energy center, and there's a block of flats on the right-hand side. And at that time in 2015, this project won a RIBA award for first net zero project in UK. This project was an extremely big learning experience because we had to model the energy of how it will become zero carbon and zero energy. And I think this is a process that all building services architects, engineers should go through to really understand what makes that edge or difference to actually push a project through net zero and how to keep your clients engaged through this conversation. In 2015, I came to Middle East and I started working on different projects here in Middle East. I thought because we have a global audience today, it would make sense to give a little bit introduction of United Arab Emirates and the different Emirates we have here. So essentially, when we say United Arab Emirates, it doesn't only mean Dubai. It's actually a combination of 7 Emirates, which is Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Ajman, Al Quwain, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, and Sharjah. And interesting to see that the Ministry of Climate Change has actually adopted policies to look at all the 7 Emirates in terms of climate change. So just to give you a very high level introduction of the context and impact of climate change in Middle East is actually 9th in the highest in terms of energy and electricity consumption. It's in the 1st percentile in terms of water stressed countries. And it's in the 22nd percentile out of 25 in terms of food security. So Ministry of Climate Change's big focus right now is energy, water, and food nexus. This is a brief screenshot of the impacts of climate change that we'll have in Middle East, which is obviously the temperature, humidity, sea level rise, rainfall, and extreme climatic events. Now, I thought this would be an interesting picture to show in front of the audience that shows that what is the current level of water and electricity generation happening in Middle East. So there's a lot of desalination happens in the region because the groundwater is really low. There is electricity production, which is mainly from natural gas, which the government is now slowly moving towards renewables. And the green circles that you see on the screen are actually the solar and PV farms across Middle East. There is nuclear power plants as well. And the yellow dot is the waste to energy plant that's currently being built in collaboration with MASDAR in BIA, which is in Sharjah. Now, these are the 5 main policy motivations that the government has aspired towards: clean energy, looking at energy and water efficiency, transportation, and improvements in their oil and gas sector. And then there are other policy levels across the Emirates and federal policy documents that kind of shows how the different Emirates are going to be targeting their energy reduction targets. None of these policies actually clearly defines a net zero roadmap at present, but we do aim to see that the government is looking at how to reduce the carbon and energy emission and actually create a pathway towards net zero for Middle East. The diagram you see in front of you shows, the left-hand one shows the Gulf countries, Middle East and outside, what's happening in terms of solar. And on the right-hand side, you see all the initiatives that's been happening in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, from a floating solar farm to solar farms across Abu Dhabi and Dubai and the MASDAR area as well. And this is, first in Middle East. It's called a CSP, which is a world's first concentrated solar plant, and it's apparently one of the largest in the world. So the idea in Middle East is to look, and this was completed in January of 2020 with a 950 megawatt production capacity with 260 meter high receiver. And it has a very interesting project partnerships across the globe, from China to Denmark to Spain to Belgium. And what Middle East have done is actually brought in the experts across the globe to create this concentrated solar power plant and actually monitor it and generate electricity to see how best to make the city more sustainable and road to renewables. Middle East have also in UAE have adopted global innovation plan. There is a 2.7 to 3.8 billion US dollar investment has been adopted in 7 sectors, which you see on the bottom of my screen, looking at renewables, transportation, technology, education, health, water, and space. This is quite positive because globally we are in a pandemic situation and also in the middle of a climate emergency. And globally, according to World Green Building Council, all the innovations and the technology required to globally meet our carbon reduction goals are already exists. What is required is government investments and drivers to actually push these agendas. So what we see kind of in Middle East right now is that there's quite a bit of traction happening in terms of innovation, in terms of investment model, policies, and roadmaps slowly coming forward to create that sustainable pathway towards a resilient living solution. And currently, Emirates Green Building Council is actually leading this pathway for both the private and the public sector. They have established a Net Zero Center for Excellence in 2018. They have done recent studies and research which shows that the market will be ready for a net zero roadmap from 2020 to 2030, which is within this 10 years. They have also formed certification with ILFI, International Living Future Institute, which has the world's first net zero certification. And they have also defined a net zero definition for the Gulf region, which you will see a screenshot on top. And what is interesting is that Emirates Green Building Council have every year they come up with a market brief. And the latest market brief shows that 64 million meter square area in the Middle East are actually already have a green building regulation adopted within their building stock. And they do see this number rising very quickly. Now, this RIB event is actually quite timely because last week, as SIPC UAE chapter, we had our first net zero conference. And all the recording of the conference will be uploaded in our YouTube channel. And then this week, we are having this RIBA conversation about net zero. And next week, World Green MENA Green Building Council is actually holding a green building conference with a talk and a pathway towards net zero. So what we are seeing is that, especially during the pandemic and afterwards, there's a huge traction happening, opening up this conversation. It's slow, but it is going towards the right direction. On my screen right now, I have few project examples, and these are the projects currently under construction, which aims to become net zero. First is the Tilal Al Gharafa Sales and Experience Center. The bottom one is C Institute from the Sustainable City. Interesting to see that both Tilal Al Gharafa and Sustainable City, both of these projects are initiated by developers, so which shows that there is a movement happening and traction coming from developer side as well. DEWA headquarters, which is on top middle of my screen, aims to become net zero as well. Then MASDAR Ecovilla has a very rigorous and a very good case study, which has been adopted by Sheikh Zayed Housing. And then lastly, the Expo Sustainability Pavilion, which you see on the bottom right, aims to become net zero in operation post-Expo. What I have on my screen on the top right is a book by Ibrahim Zubi, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Mujid Al Futtaim Group, which is the largest asset holders of a retail and commercial space in Middle East. And what is interesting to see in this book is that he actually talks about how to become net positive from a business perspective. So this shows that Middle East is in the pathway of talking, creating awareness, and having those mindset shift towards a net zero roadmap. So today I'm going to talk about a project via headquarters designed by Zaha Hadid Architects. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the history of the project, the work that has been done so far, and the vision of the project, because we are still working on the project. It aims to be completed this year, and then the real work starts because we want to become net zero. So we have to do a lot of work after the project finishes. Those who don't know Sharjah is the third largest economy in Middle East after Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Sharjah is responsible for 7.4% of UAE's GDP. It has 2 coastlines, and Sharjah is a manufacturing city. 48% of the country's gross industrial output comes from Sharjah. It has a lot of industries, and it has one of the third largest airports in the Middle East. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea, we have the Sharjah city center on the left, then the Sharjah airport, Sharjah National Park, and then the BIA new headquarters. Essentially, it's a 15 minutes drive from the Sharjah airport and 30 minutes drive from the Sharjah city center. That's the site for the BIA's new headquarters, designed by Zaha Hadid Architects. And opposite of the site, marked in yellow, you will see BIA's waste recycling plant. Now, this is the site. This is the site where the building is located. There is a little school here, and opposite is a factory and residential area. And then there's this huge waste recycling plant that BIA has. BIA is one of the largest waste recycling bodies in Middle East, and they have 27 recycling plants with collecting recyclables across the Middle East and actually creating different products and equipments out of those waste. This image gives you a little bit of an idea of the site. So this is the road, main road. This is the entrance. This is our site office, if you can see my mouse moving. And then this is a recent picture taken 2 weeks ago. And what shows is the building at its current state. So we are still doing the site work. So this is from the back side of the building, where you will see this is the second entrance. There's a courtyard, external glazing, and then there's the main entrance on this side. I think when we talk about BIA, it's very important to talk about the client, because the client has been amazingly aware, and it has been a journey for both Zaha Hadid Architects, the project managers, Matthew Southwest, and ourselves, that to start opening these conversations about accreditations, beyond accreditations, net zero, the benefits, why we should do it, what's the business case for it. And I think having these conversations is extremely, extremely important. So what you see on the left side of my screen is Group CEO, His Highness Khaled Huraino. And then he is the CEO of BIA, which is the largest waste management company in the Middle East. And then in the middle is the MD, Miss Nada Tariam. She's my direct client, so it's great to work for a woman. MD of Civil and Architecture Projects. And what you see image on the top right-hand side, sorry, bottom right-hand side, is when the BIA project was presented to His Highness. And this BIA project was inaugurated as an innovative, futuristic office space. But it's also not an office space, it's actually a living laboratory. It's a building that will be studied for health and well-being. It will be studied to understand how people work, what's the different mode of working. And Khaled is actually, with lots of our conversations between ourselves and him, we signed an agreement with Microsoft. We will be actually monitoring the building with ourselves and able to actually understand how people are using the building, what is the energy requirement, what is the well-being requirement, what is the futuristic office building looks like. So we're very excited for this building to open, because a lot of fun things are going to be happening after the building opens. So this just to show a bit of a construction stage project team. It's Zaha Hadid Architects. Corinne is our contractor, Bura Hapol with Matthew Southwest as the main project manager. Now, before I start presenting this project, I think it's important to say that the design stage work was done by Zaha Hadid Architects and Atelier 10, who are the MEP and the sustainability consultants. It's Patrick Bellow's team. What you see on the screen from the left-hand side is when the project came to our desk on summer of 2015, The project has already achieved a LEED Gold. The project has achieved a 36% energy reduction from the baseline model. The sustainability and MEP strategies, high-level design strategies were completed. And the idea was, or my scope was, to take the project and complete a LEED Gold status during the construction stage. But when you have a project like this, it's also an opportunity to open up conversations, and that's what we did. So I opened up this conversation with a client to see, okay, the project already has LEED Gold. What else can we do? What else is possible? What is your ultimate vision with the project? And what we did was, that's where these roadmaps were created. So what do we need to do from LEED Gold to LEED Platinum? And then the conversation opened up. What do we need to do from LEED Platinum to Net Zero? What is additional investment required from the client? What is additional commitment required by the design team? Now, when such things are happening, you need a really closed-knit design team who actually shares the vision. So when the project was at our desk during construction stage, we hold a lot of meetings and conversations to see how we can take and what are the steps we need to do and what are the responsibilities of each of the consultants to make this move. So there's three main concepts that was adopted from the construction stage onward to move the project from platinum to net zero. First is the sustainability model. What you see on the left is a sustainability Venn diagram that has been used for 12 years, but research have found in the last 6-7 years that we really need to look at a more holistic way of sustainability. And the new sustainability model, a stronger model, is the 5 capital model of sustainability, which you see on the right side of my screen, that actually look at the natural capital, the social and human capital, and then finally the financial and manufactured capital. And what we have found is that when we connect these, the project becomes more holistic because it actually look at every need of the capital model. The second concept is accreditation. Now, accreditation is actually a starting of a conversation. It's actually a baseline to make sure that the building meets all the criteria. But the conversation we had in BIA is that how can we move the accreditation, push it forward, platinum and others. What you see here is a scorecard, generally quite boring. But what is important to understand is that at different credits were taken and then thought and discussed with the design team to see what additional steps we can take, how much would it cost, and what benefit and value it will bring to the occupants. And if when the value of the occupants were higher, the client actually went for it because there was a logic behind it. The third concept that I would like to talk about is the concept of urban heat island effect. Now, globally in Western countries, the cities are hotter than the suburbs, but the Earth Observation and Environmental Remote Sensing Laboratory in MASDAR Institute have been studying 25 years of NASA satellite data. And what they have found is that for the last 25 years, during the daytime, the microclimatic conditions in arid cities are actually reversed. That means the heat island is reversed. What that means is that during daytime, the desert is hotter, then the city is cooler. And at nighttime, the cities are much hotter and the desert is cooler. And it's only because many of the Middle Eastern cities, the desert is just sand. So it heats up very fast and it holds the heat. While on the city, there is porous and non-porous surfaces, there's trees, there's buildings, there's overshading. And my colleague just presented these walkable spaces with shading. There's a lot of things happens with shaded trees and shaded walkways. So it actually reduces the urban heat island effect by 3 to 4 degrees centigrade in arid climates. But as soon as the sun goes down, then the city starts exceeding their heat and the desert cools off very quickly because it's sand. So working in Middle Eastern cities, this is a very important concept to understand whether the building is located in a desert environment or in a city environment. And in our case, BIA, it was in the middle of a desert. So this pathway that we followed is quite simple. First, to reduce the demand, then service effectively, which is the HVAC system, because in Middle East, 70% of the electricity generation happens for space cooling. Buildings are quite leaky, so passive design is extremely important. And then we look at on-site and off-site renewables. Now, in Middle East, we don't have the concept of allowable solutions that we have in UK. So that's not a conversation we can actually have. But the other concept that I discussed is actually a step-by-step process towards a more renewable, sustainable way of thinking for buildings. So for this project, I'll touch quickly on the passive design. So the thermal mass was highly important because we need to block the sun. But also in the Middle East, we need to be able to make the surface a bit breathable as well. There's a fine balance. So for BIA, the thermal mass is extremely good. The windows are quite small in sizing and openable. There's a lot of natural daylight coming in. As you can see, many of the spaces are shaded. Some of the windows are open, but the windows are designed in such a way that when the sun is at its peak, there will be shading, and the sun is at lowest, and there will be solar glazing from internal blinds and all that. This is the main entrance. Most of the spaces are under shade because of the surface of the building. Water scarcity is a big issue at that site. So we are recycling every single bit of water that we're using. There's a gray water recycling system. Any planting that's been used there are all xeriscaping and desert landscaping. So we worked with 2 botanists to actually find regional plants that we can use that looks good, looks green, but also doesn't take too much of water. And then finally, we looked at the public transportation. We looked at how people will be moving between the spaces, even internally from a health and well-being and air quality perspective. This is an image, and what I've highlighted is the courtyard, and I will see that even the sun moves throughout the day, because of the shape of the building, the courtyard would be really nicely shaded. Now, this courtyard is quite important because the windows on this internal courtyard are openable. The idea is to have some level of cross ventilation, so to increase the thermal comfort, but also take account of the thermal mass and reduce the cooling load of the building. Now, as life happens, when design changes when design finishes and design stage submissions are done for LEED and others, and then it goes into construction, there's a lot of scope changes happens. Now, we started working as Borough Hapoel during the construction stage. We were quite aware that we didn't have the design stage energy model. So we kept a tab of all the design changes happening, all the design enhancements are happening, scope changes happening, and also in Middle East, the regulation sometimes changes quite quickly in certain sectors. So as we created a log, we realized a lot of the design changes happening in this project, especially from design enhancement, new scope, and design gaps, because of the local regulations changing, had an energy impact. And as the project was going for platinum and then has an ambition to go to net zero, the question was that, do we take the simple route? And the simple route is do a hand calculation, submit the additional energy requirements, put some PV in, make it pass through platinum, submit to LEED, and get the job done. But the correct way of doing it is actually capture this information in a proper energy model, make the energy model a single source of truth of the site and the construction and all the changes that's happening. So we have a digital model of a live building on our screen that's exactly on the site. So we had conversation with the client and we explained this to him and Nada. And what came out of that is that we created a new energy model from the Rhino model that Zaha's had. Now, anybody who has worked with IS and all these energy software knows IS doesn't like curvature. It likes boxes. So creating what you see screenshot on my right-hand side is the IS model. And creating that actually took us 3 months because we actually had to write script and point out every single dot from the Rhino model into an Excel spreadsheet, convert it, and then put it into IS. So IS can capture all the single points and all the curvature. Now, why did we go through all this pain? Because there was a lot of plenums in this project, a lot of underwater, underfloor heating and cooling. And the idea was to capture all this information with the intention that, yes, we're going to submit to LEED, but the model becomes as accurate as on site. So we can actually use this model for net zero monitoring. So this is a video. As you can see, there's a lot of shading happening within the building itself. This is the main entrance. Oh, sorry. I'll show you this one. This is our IS model. This is the model we use for energy calculation, both for platinum, and we would be using it for net zero calculations as well. So coming to that, the idea is to actually create an energy model that is as accurate as the HVAC system, as the building that's sitting on site. Now, looking at this diagram, you will see that it's a small building, but we have 5 different HVAC systems. The reason being, because the space usage were different, the orientation were different, the sun coming in these spaces and the occupancy was different. So we really wanted to mimic the BIA's working profile and the space usage profile, instead of designing something which is actually over-designed and then over-designing the PV. So what we came up is that we mapped the occupancy hours that BIA uses for its staff members to the natural daylight and their sitting positions, and by using this method, we actually reduced the lighting load by 50%. So it's not just using fancy monitoring systems and all that. Yes, we did do that, but it's also understanding the passive ways of reducing the lighting demand for projects like this. This is a screenshot. What you see on the right-hand side is we had to create a baseline model for LEED Platinum submission, but through working and finding the most efficient pumps and exhausts, we reduced the process load by 70%. The lighting demand that I mentioned reduced by 50% just by understanding the space usage, people flow movement within the space. We did some people flow movement modeling to actually understand how better the space would be used and actually have those conversations with the client. And lastly, the space cooling load. Because we have a very good thermal mass, some of the windows are partially openable. We have designed the space based on people and foreseeable movement. We reduced the space cooling load by 50%. So what we did here is actually took the lessons learned from Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, Four Seasons Hotel in Abu Dhabi, and typical office buildings that we have designed and worked and monitored. So all the post-occupancy evaluation data that we have working in these big complex projects, we actually implemented the lessons learned in our energy model and the predictive modeling. So this is an energy balancing diagram, and what you see on the left is the total electricity coming to the building. We need to have a Sharjah electricity connection, so that was a load for that, and then the PV that's adopted to the building. Now we separated the PV load in 2 ways. One set of PV is just delivering energy just for the building itself, and certain set of PVs are delivering electricity outside of the building, which is external lighting and other features. And what we found on the right-hand side is that top part proposed case, the HVAC load was 49%, but usually in Middle East, the HVAC load is actually 70%. So we saved quite a bit on the HVAC and the lighting of this project. And the final strategy.
Farah, sorry. As always, we're running a little behind. Is it possible we could
I have just 3 more minutes.
3? We'll bear with you, Farah. Thank you. Please make it 2. Thank you.
Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is the renewable strategy. What we did is we used a Tesla power pack. So we have PVs on the site, and then we have Tesla power pack as a battery storage. And we did a lot of calculation. This is the site strategy that talks about the energy center, the PV, and the Tesla power pack. The idea is that we will use the PV, and the over generation will be stored in the battery, will be used in the morning and in the evening time. So this is how we are actually creating a pathway to net zero. And the last part is in order to make it net zero, this is the roadmap that we have devised, and this is the part we will be taking after the project is completed, is to have a very specific detailed net zero strategy, a soft landing framework based on BISRIA, data collection, and then identifying what is the best route to net zero, whether is it lead zero or water or ILFI. And the last thing I wanted to say is that when we work on net zero building, we can't be looking at just the building itself. It's very important to look at the wider side. So BIA and MASDAR are building the waste to energy plant in Sharjah. And one of the ideas is to connect the wider 27 recycling plants that they have with the overall site of BIA to actually create a site-wide energy strategy for the project. So this is just a step one of actually creating a more energy efficient strategy for the project. My last slide here, sorry, is that I started with saying what is happening in terms of the Middle East. So these are the future things that are predicted to be happening. So Emirates Green Building Council is actually creating a net zero pathway for 2020 to 2030, and really looking at how we can, as an industry, get involved in this pathway. They have formed the EGBC task force for embodied carbon, and there's a lot of research funding happening in terms of concrete usage, material usage. So please do visit Emirates Green Building website to understand what are the possibilities are. Now, this is, sorry, my last slide, Professor Langton Morris, and he is actually from London School of Economics, and we're working together actually to create a roadmap from 2020 to 2032 of how Middle East cities can move towards a more net zero pathway. And there are 6 or 7, what you see on the bottom of the screen are the roadmaps that we are looking at. So this document will be issued middle of this year, so please have a look out for it. I'm sure this is something you will be really enjoy, and something will be very helpful. It's a bit of the roadmap to show how it's going to be happening. And lastly, there's a book coming out next year looking at people, innovation, well-being in terms of net zero. So I hope you will find this helpful. Sorry, really apologize. I'm done. Sorry, Chris.
Thank you very much, Farah, and sorry for rushing you there at the end. It really was a fascinating presentation and absolutely great to see how you demonstrated passive sustainable design principles in practice. We'd now like to introduce Chris Wan, who is the head of design management of MASDAR, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company. Chris, please, when you're ready, do share with us your screen and tell us about the sustainable ideologies and projects which you are delivering.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where your locations are. So, rounding up on the third case study today, I will talk about some of the work that we have done at the MASDAR City project. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Chris Wan. I head the design management section of the sustainable real estate arm of MASDAR. I'm an architect by training, but I've spent many years in the area with that interface between an employer stroke government organization, and also working many years experience as a design consultant as well, and doing my very best to bridge that gap to produce sustainable solutions. Abu Dhabi is the largest Emirates in the United Arab Emirates, and then within the Emirates there is the city of Abu Dhabi. This slide here just shows the location of the MASDAR City project within the context of Abu Dhabi, and we are located right next to the Abu Dhabi International Airport. I myself work at MASDAR City, so my whole working life now evolves around the project that I work in. The idea behind the master plan, which was originally created by Fosters and Partners, is the idea of a sustainable community, and this master plan has gone through many iterations. In a broad brushstroke, we are dealing with a high density, low rise community that explores the relationship of livability with infrastructure, with transportation. Some images here of the built environment as we are today, and you can see common themes that you might recognize from the Msheireb project earlier, where we have this kind of idea of walkability and narrow shaded streets, creating an environment where buildings are cheek and jowl next to each other. Just some of the organizing principles and development summary on your screen. Just to cut to the chase, principles relating to orientation. When I mean orientation, is about understanding the solar and the wind. We are a mixed use development, and hence a large proportion of the development is residential. Actually, it's over 60% of it is residential, then combined with of commercial community facilities, and we even have an area designated to some R&D and light industry. There is an exploration of what it means to build a community from a pedestrian-led approach. And of course, this is giving rise to generally pushing out vehicular transportation, where we can replace that by walkable streets. And then in amongst that, we are heavily concentrated on high performance buildings. These are the current design criteria that we work with at the moment. And again, this is a live document, right? And when I say live document, what I mean is that these numbers here represent, you could say, our current high-level findings in the integration of the different pillars of sustainability. Right? MASDAR is a for-profit organization. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Mubadala investment company, and being part of an investment company, one of the major remit here for us is to understand the relationship of green and the economics of it. And the green buildings that we do build are expected to work in the local economy, the local market. We are competing in the local real estate market for tenants, for residents. And to me, that creates an interesting challenge to deliver green buildings at effectively business as usual economics. MASDAR has two main business units, and on our cousins within MASDAR is the clean energy unit, and they build clean energy, renewable energy plant in Abu Dhabi, in the region, and also globally. The picture you see here is a 10 megawatt plant that was inaugurated at MASDAR City in 2009. It is 10 megawatts, but at the time it was the largest solar farm in the region. So this is to say that our relationship with renewable energy started very early. And today, just I'm concentrating this talk to address the issue of net zero energy. I do like to say that there are many dimensions to the MASDAR City and the work we're doing. And so very that we are concentrated on this particular subject about net zero. I'll work in that area. But of course, if anyone's interested in the wider topic of sustainable and livable development, I'm happy to engage separately. This is the a picture of the rooftop of the a building that was originally inaugurated as the MASDAR Institute, and today it is the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence. So this was one of the first buildings at MASDAR City, and this was opened in 2010. And you can see on the rooftop is very dense, it's very busy. You can see PV panels next to roof lights, and there is an area back where we have thermal water heaters, right? Even though we covered the roof extensively at the time, given the efficiencies of the PV panels that we were working with, this at the time provided approximately 30% of the total energy demand of the building that the panels situate above. A second foray into renewable energy. This is the headquarters for the International Renewable Energy Agency. This project is designed by Woods Bagot, and the engineering was working with Bureau Happold. And so on this particular project, you can see a very visual statement of how the PV panels on the roof are relating to this project. And because of the high mass or the large floor plate of the building, again, and this building was inaugurated in 2015, right? 1,000 square meter of PV panels on the roof of building contributes approximately 10% of the overall energy consumption of the building. Now, this is bearing in mind that this is already a very energy efficient building. It has approximately 42-43% energy saving against the ASHRAE benchmark. And yet, from my experience, a PV array like this has only a nominal contribution to the building. And so this is a diagram I've historically shared with many people, and saying to understand the concept behind the buildings at MASDAR, where we strongly promote that you provide the bulk of your energy reduction compared to business as usual through architectural design, and from its massing and orientation through how you deal with the envelope, the shapes of the buildings, how you select the construction materials before you enter the arena of dealing with active measures. And then finally, the introduction of energy generation to offset some of the energy demand. What's been happening over the last 10 years, we were discovering that the cost of the energy generation has been gradually decreasing. And eventually you get to the point where maybe from a pure economics point of view, the whole idea of a net zero energy goes into the realm of possibility. So our first piece of work is a little pilot project, and we designed in partnership with Woods Bagot, and again this is also with Bureau Happold, a pilot project for a villa. We selected a villa type because the villa typology is still very prevalent, that there are major housing programs in the UAE to deal with villas, and as these are being built, we felt it was appropriate to explore what we can do with villas. It's floor plans here, 400 square meters. It's a 3-bed villa. The planning of this particular one went through intensively working with UAE nationals, so that the layout itself has that right balance of how people live here and the relationship with culture and the privacy. And you can see here just a simple 3D model just showing the location of the PV panels. Right. So in order to achieve net zero energy, all the basic principles of what you do to a building to reduce its energy footprint still applies. So that was done through vigorous modeling. There's every component just looked very carefully. However, please bear in mind that back to this idea about the economic viability, right? It was deliberately, whatever materials looked at and however we approached it, the economics part was always stayed in the back of our mind, and the idea of the affordability is extremely important to us. And so after passive studies, then we look at some of the technologies we can add. Solar hot water, variable refrigerant flow systems, some energy recovery systems, right? And some quite intensive energy modeling to try to optimize the form and the shape of the buildings, the location of windows. Sorry, jumped the gun there. And here's just a little summary of the transformation from looking at very old existing villas in the UAE, where it's virtually very limited insulation at 350 kilowatt hour per square meter per year is where they come in, to a more regular modern villa that follow local sustainability guidelines down to 180 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. And through optimization, we are just getting the villa under 100 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. I generally do receive a comment that compared to other standards in the world, that these numbers do appear very high. But of course, a big bulk of this energy consumption is related to the requirement of air conditioning because of the intense heat that we exist in Abu Dhabi. And then so all that work to get the energy footprint down, we got it to a state where by introducing the PV panels, and this particular one is a sun power model, a 315 kilowatt panel. And if you install, in this particular case, from memory, 87 panels, right? And with the sunlight available that we have here, it is just sufficient to produce the same amount of energy that one would require to power this villa. So when you put it together, you get effectively the net zero energy status. This is a picture of the interior. I put this one in because when I bring people to look at this villa and I tell them in advance that we have a net zero energy villa, many people expect that we will walk into a Star Trek building or similar. And this is just simply to say, not to say that this is everyone's taste for interior, but when it comes to net zero energy living, it's important that we are dealing with the science and the engineering, right? And the visual dimension or the aesthetic dimension of net zero remains in the realm of creative design. So looking forward, this project here is something that is on our drawing board at the moment. And it's a project next to the IRENA headquarters. You can just about see the IRENA headquarters on the right. And we're just completed the design and this game working with Woodspaggot this time. What's interesting about this building is that we're beginning to explore at a much larger scale now the relationship of PV panels to building form and using it in a architecturally creative way, but also purposeful way. The location of those PV panels are essentially in that area because this particular site is slightly shaded. And so that was a determination of where we can optimize the panels, and then that kind of folded to become part of the architecture. So the balance of how much area you can build and in relationship how much energy you can produce on the site is an ongoing discussion. So this building is an office building, and it is on paper it is targeting net zero. We are hopefully going to be starting construction of this by the Q3 to Q4 this year. And so this is our first major foray, so to speak, into large scale net zero energy. We have a couple of other projects also ongoing that is also exploring net zero energy for other building typology. So those are slightly earlier in its design stages. And so that is to come, and hopefully I can complete those, or the team here can complete those, and we can present them at a later stage. And on a last slide here, I talked about architects that we work with, but at the same time, we sometimes our own team inside like to go on our own exploratory path of energy architecture. And these two SketchUp images here was a little in-house study on what was effectively a shoestring budget project. But what we're exploring is something that I felt was very interesting that I wanted to share today. Because normally in the world of planning, when you determine densities of buildings or within the master plan, you look at what the infrastructure can support, you look at the transportation network, you understand your vicinity of your development away from maybe from the city center, and that gives some kind of direction what density you can build. In this particular project, we tried something completely inverted, right? We're saying, given a certain plot area, we asked the question, what is the maximum energy you can produce on the roof, right? And once you establish that, because of our collection of data of existing energy efficient buildings, we have kind of this rough idea where a energy efficient building, the amount of power that we need. So the reverse engineering, so to speak, is the start of how much energy you can produce, and that became the determinant factor of how much area we can build underneath it. So if you reverse that equation, we thought that would be an interesting way to look at density, and also to be able to ensure from the outset that you have a very good chance of achieving net zero energy, as opposed to the oftentimes challenge that we have. We design something and build something, and then we kind of look at how much technology or how much PV we need to add to try to balance that equation. And when we cannot fit enough on the roof, people start talking about integrating into facades and all this type. Although technology exists, we do understand that, again, I'm going back to the thing about making it affordable, making it profitable. And in that way, we believe that the solutions can be more easily replicated. And that, at the end of the day, is what we're trying to do, find solutions that we can share and other people can replicate within the Emirates and within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's really refreshing to see the photovoltaics incorporated in the schemes that you showed were much, much more than passing gestures. Though, of course, your honesty on how much more is really needed to truly make any real contribution to any building's energy consumption. It was very, very honest of you. Thank you very much. And thank you to all panelists this evening. And apologies to everyone for running over time. I think best now that I hand over to Andy, who will try to get us back on track. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yep, thank you, everybody. Oh, sorry, it's a bit dark in here now. Okay, we've got a lot of technical questions, but because we've overrun a bit, I'm going to try get the more technical ones answered later directly, I'll pass them on to the panelists and then we'll circulate them. But we had a few kind of more general questions that I thought would be good to put to all the panel. And I've got a couple of people I'm going to bring up to ask them. The first is somebody, still here, called Ilugi. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Who's going to ask about materials. I've just invited you to join as a panelist. If you'd like to introduce yourself. You've actually asked several questions, but the one was interested in about materials and how they can be applied now and maybe even looking to the future and what's changing. I found it interesting to see Chris showing that you can get a net zero villa, and that's really with current technology. With if solar panels progress like phones and things have, is in 5-10 years you might be getting into good positive territory even. But yeah, I think if you're here, you can put on your mic and camera if you like and ask the panel yourself, and then they can answer as they like. Thank you.
Sorry, my internet connection just dropped when you were asking. My question as well to the Zaha Hadid building was actually how you are achieving net zero in terms of the materials as well, which what in choosing sustainable materials, especially in that area where you have to import a lot of the materials. So how you are extending your strategy into that area?
Thank you very much for the question, and it's a very relevant question. Usually, material and embodied carbon calculation should be done during design stage when the intention and the vision of the building is set. But unfortunately, when the design was done, the target was only LEED Gold. And when myself and my team took over the project, we pushed it to platinum, and we are setting up a roadmap to net zero. And one of the pathways of the roadmap is to look at embodied carbon as part of a calculation. So we have to do a bit of reverse engineering to actually look at the embodied carbon and the materials coming in and out. But from a LEED perspective and construction site perspective, all the materials that currently we are using in the material are all have recycles, and we are pushing the boundary on what is the current scope. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But is there actually also an intention to produce material within the country instead of importing it?
It's in the middle of a desert, and most of the materials does get imported, and that is something globally that the ministry and the government are looking at. So a building that already has concrete, we have to work within that. But for the other futuristic buildings, there are futuristic materials that are currently being explored within the country. But that is for a new building. I think it's an easier conversation.
And in regards to the roof, what did actually your study show in how the roof was contributing to the heat island effect?
The roof wasn't contributing to the heat island effect at all. What we did is that we had a highly insulated roof to block the sun. And that actually helped with a higher thermal lag. Therefore, we reduced the cooling load by getting natural ventilation in as much as possible, except for the Shamal season, which is the desert storm.
But I was more thinking about heating up the environment, not necessarily within the building, because obviously you can overcome that through insulation, but more the reflection of the heat into the environment.
The SRI value, that's what you mean. Yes, we have a coating on the roof and the entire building to have a, how should I say, a better SRI value so it doesn't reflect off.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
We'll have another question we're going to bring up in a second. I'd like to go back to one of the original questions. It was about materials and how they can be used for sustainable design in terms of how you use glass and concrete, and maybe what will be used in the future. Because we know that using in Europe, lots of timber frame buildings are appearing now, but that can't be used in this environment. I've seen a presentation recently with 3D printed concrete that they were claiming 50 to 80% less embodied carbon, but this has not gone beyond pilot stages. What do you see being the key materials in the region for construction in the next 5-10 years as we look at the next generation of buildings? Anybody on the panel can answer that.
I like to speak to this question. And of course, because we do have many buildings on the ground, this question does come up a lot in our discussion, our discussion with the supply chain in various forms. And I just want to kind of set 3 examples, and there's many. From a concrete point of view, we've been adopting the use of GGBS as an additive to the concrete from quite early stages, and this has allowed us to reduce the embodied carbon of the concrete by in the region of about 40%. We do that for a second reason, because the particular site that that MASDAR City located on, we have very high water table, and we sit on a hypersaline soil, meaning so 2 meters below our ground level, 3 meters below our grade level, we have water that is about 5 times saltier than seawater, right? And that's a challenge. And the GGBS actually also helps to kind of protect the concrete when you do substructures work. So it's a kind of win-win situation. The second one is we engage the supply chain here. And one example I think I'd like to use is that we used to put something like aluminium onto an essential blacklist on material, because we don't recommend the use of aluminium because of its high embodied carbon. As an outcome of that, the aluminium companies got slightly upset with us. I don't know why, but they did. And so, but then rather than just be upset, they actually engaged with us, right? And we said, look, other parts of the world, we can have recycled aluminium, right? No, and we believe we should as well. So if we can get that into supply chain, right, then we take you off our list. And as a result of that type of conversation, now in Abu Dhabi, in the market, right, it exists 80 and 90% recycled aluminium. Right, so there is this kind of to and fro, and it starts from asking for it and sometimes making a stance. So we were quite happy that we can exert some kind of influence to make this type of change. And thirdly, is there is a nascent industry starting to appear locally about building materials, and at MASDAR City, we also have this kind of sort of tech hub that we call the Catalyst. And I myself just been engaged with some of these startup companies that are converting various waste components into building materials. And there's a lot of work going on. But as I said, these are still very early stages, but certainly the intent there is there and is well recognized. And it just lastly about embodied carbon. There is no benchmark as such in the UAE, but we actively track the embodied carbon of all our buildings. I think in a slide I had up about the environmental requirements, point number 7 or 8 was about recording the embodied carbon. And even though we don't have a scientific baseline, we thought that at least we could collect as much data as possible to understand what might be meant as a business as usual baseline, so that in the future we can all work together to gradually lower these baselines. We need to be able to measure things before we can take action.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any other answers to this broad important topic?
Next?
Yeah, sure.
So Chris, thank you for putting those 2 very important points about the embodied carbon. I will start with that. So with Emirates Green Building Council, we're actually putting a task force together. So maybe I should invite you to actually create a regional benchmark of embodied carbon of materials. Secondly, Chris put in a very important point about the supply chain. We actually really need to challenge the market to actually get good things happen. And what MASDAR and Chris have done with aluminium is exactly what we should be doing with all of our materials in terms of supply chain. The third point I want to add is that there are a lot of startups globally who are actually converting waste into building materials, and there's a lot of tests and innovation happening globally. And one of the discussions happening is how to bring those innovative entrepreneurial ideas into Middle East and use the local Middle East materials and regional materials. So I think this is something, a space to look out for, and also for all of us to be a bit adaptive, to be able to adopt that in our projects and our thinking. So a bit of R&D investment and entrepreneurial persuasion is definitely required on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. I know we're getting a bit short of time. I've brought up Simon. If you want to answer that question at the end, you can, because I'm going to ask Jay to ask his question to all of you about the role of architects. I think he's calling from the UK. If you'd like to come on, Jay. And after, I don't have time for any more questions actually, but there were some specific about Msheireb that you may want to answer, Simon, if you have time, but otherwise we can try fill up what we can after. So Jay, hi, would you like to put your question to the panel? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, everyone. It's really quite interesting to see this standard of sustainability that's being adhered to in the Middle East. And it seems that this level of sustainability and green compliance is almost creating a new vernacular in itself for design and for climate comfort. And as Chris said, to achieve these levels, you're having to integrate PV into not just roofs, but facades itself. So my question stems from these ideas we're exploring at university and in our studios around this buzz phrase, what is the role of the architect? And I'm curious as to what all of you think the role of the architect is currently in combating climate change, but also how do you imagine the role of the architect will or should change as global warming increases?
I'll certainly kick off on that one. I think we did a study about how our practice operates and the energy we use and all of the systems that what footprint we make as a business. And in doing that, we also looked at how much impact we have through our design work. And what was fascinating to us and encouraging really is that our ability to influence climate change is far greater through our design work than anything we can possibly do to reduce our impact as an operational business. A lot of us cycle to work, so there's a huge loads of positives already about the way we operate and use of public transport. But its design is a huge tool for playing a positive role in something that as citizens, many people feel passionate about wanting to do something. We are well placed and already actively doing things to drive this forward. So in terms of what architects then do more specifically within that design work, it's partly the ingenuity of architects that has a role. It's the management of complexity and bringing ideas together, because we always play a role, I feel, as orchestrating projects. We are very open to ideas, but we need to synthesize them ultimately into something. And I think that role of the architect as bringing those ideas together, yes, into an artifact, into a product with materiality and energy use, but more importantly, really, as a setting for people's lives. And the thing that will never go away really is that we make places for people. And that's, regardless of everything else that's going on around us, that's at the core of our work. So we'd like to stay active in that territory and try and make it as responsive as possible to the climate emergency.
Thank you, Simon. Before I pass on to everyone's answer next, Jay, I have some bad news and good news for you. I think the panel we've had today is like really the best of the best in the region, and unfortunately is a minority. They really are the kind of, I wish all the projects were like this, but they're not. Then we had to look and think quite hard to find examples of really good case studies that are actually built, not just on paper. So if you're watching from the UK, you maybe have a distorted view of what happens in the Middle East if you're just seeing these projects. And it's kind of showing the bigger problem to address here when there's a whole set of buildings that need to aim this high. But yes, so maybe we misled people by showing the best projects. But yeah, I'm glad it's been taken positively. And we're keen people in the UK see what's going on in the Gulf, and RIBA will be doing a bit more of that soon. Actually, we hear there's lots of interest. Okay, now who else would like to answer Jay's question from the panel? Chris, thank you. Mic on, please.
My physical hand. To your point, actually, Andy, first I'll speak to that one about the best of the best, right? Well, thank you for kind of including us in that category. But at the end of the day, as you infer, there is a lot to be done here. And I like to just repeat again, our real mission here is not only about trying to create showcases that we can all kind of study, but really trying to build that bridge into the whole total world of buildings here. And therefore we're trying to find solutions that are real and that are practical. And that's I must admit, it is really, really challenging. I mean, it's part of the fun as well. But that's where MASDAR City is at, is finding those practical solutions that can be done, right? And on that point, we have many third-party developers at MASDAR City, right? And they work with architects of a very, very wide range, and we impress upon them the same standards. Now, there is you could say, a lot of integration to trying to figure out how to do that, but it was trying to demonstrate that, let's call it a typical developer who's in there just to turn a profit can still do it in a green way. So that's been a very interesting study. So what I show today are our own self-development, but we do a lot of work with, call it your more kind of regular developer and how they can go green. So, but then back to Jay's question about the role of the architect. Today I talked about technical solutions, right, to deal with the route to net zero. But behind all of that, there's something that's probably even more important than the solutions, and that is the actual process itself, right? And so you can't build you can't build a Ferrari factory just by taking a Ferrari car and taking it apart and having the plans of how to build it together, right? What makes something a Ferrari is not the car itself, but the process that's behind it that they developed over years. So not saying that we're anywhere having that level of sophistication, but just to make a point that a lot of the learning that we all go through is about how we work together and the process that we go through. And so probably the most important thing, and it comes back to the role of the architect, is the architect as the integrator, right? The whole arena of integrated design or integrated development, the ability to build bridges across the discipline, the ability to break out the silo thinking. And we all talk about these things, we all recognize that silo thinking is wrong, but in the everyday reality, breaking away from those silo mentalities is actually quite hard, right? When you have 20 different disciplines in the room and everyone thinking that their discipline is the most important one in the world, which is totally understandable because they select that subject to study, right? And then to get them to work together is not easy, and no one's saying easy. But sustainable solutions and livable solutions and people, places that comes together, but in a way that's sustainable. And when I talk about sustainable, it means practical and real. It means the whole financial world is embedded in this. You need to find solutions that are not only within the core specialities, but in those zones between the disciplines. And we've had kind of first-hand experience of finding some of those solutions that exist between disciplines, right? And that is a kind of a twilight zone, so to speak, that unless you kind of jump in there, it's very, very hard to find because you never get the answer from one person. You need at least two persons to have a missing gap. And so it's actually really interesting as working from a design management point of view to how to understand the human dimension of how people work together, right? To find those collaborative solutions, but in the real world, practical way. And I believe that architects are amongst the best trained people to fulfill this role.
Thank you very much, Chris, for a very interesting answer. I think you're right about all these disciplines have the role to play, and maybe they have to see beyond their own, and who's the best place to address it, and actually how can be even stronger when working together. And if you don't know, Jay, and people watching the UK, MASDAR is really very close to government, like a lot of entities here involved in building. And so there's a kind of closer relationship with government goals and government directives going both ways about what can be done and what the government's trying to do. And I hope someone from the UK originally in other countries would have something like a MASDAR in their own country, where they're trying to push sustainable design, and it has that close relationship with government and research and any other institutes so they can get involved to help. Okay, Farah, would you like to answer this question as well? And Sandra too, you're both welcome. I think it'll be the only question we have time for. Yeah, okay.
So Jay, I agree completely with Chris and Simon. And the projects you saw today, I was behind the scene on Bora Hapul as an engineer working on the Eco Villa and Msheireb and the BF project we showed you. And I can tell you, architects are the first person their clients see. So they really need to have enough knowledge, and not just about architecture and the vision and the passion for the design, but also enough knowledge for other disciplines and see how they integrate together. So in their mindset, they really need to have an inclusive, integrated approach to design. And that's very, very important, because all the projects you've seen today, they're fascinating because everybody came in together and bought into the idea, the process, the pain to get those projects delivered. From a BIA headquarters perspective, when we push the project from gold to platinum, which is easy, but platinum to net zero is not easy. Zaha Hadid Architects, the project managers, the client, everybody got in together and bought into that vision. And we have been working on it from 2015 summer to till now. It's still on site. So it's a long relationship. It's just that it's not like you buy into it and then you don't put your effort. And the process that Chris mentioned, that's extremely important, because there are points when the architecture and the engineering merges together. So I think as engineers and architects, we always have to have wider knowledge, vision, and understand the cross points that Chris mentioned, what happens in between the disciplines. Those are so, so important, because that's the glue that puts it all together. And architect is actually the glue, I see, to actually bring this all knowledge and integration together to make this happen. It's like a music. The architect is the person who's the orchestrator.
Thank you very much, Farah. Sandra, anything to add on this?
Thank you. Yes, I'll be very brief, Andy, because I am aware of the time today. I agree with what everyone has said. I think the architect is best placed, central to the role of each project, and to raise the questions, to raise the bar, to be the change agent, because that's what we need now. We need a paradigm shift from what we've delivered in the past to what we've delivered in what we will deliver in the future. And we need to shift the process of how we do that. It is about collaboration, integration, questioning the client's visions, the developer's visions, questioning, are the standards good enough that we have to work to? And questioning, as Farah mentioned earlier, the entire supply chain. Are the materials that we are specifying, are they good enough for what we want them to do, for what we need them to do? So we need to have forums like this and collaborate and really act as change agent in the whole process. Thank you.
I think there's still actually 90 people here, but I do want to wrap up in a few minutes. But maybe there were quite a few technical questions, especially for Simon talking first. I don't know if you want to address them very briefly before we wrap up, Simon.
I don't know if they are brief.
The other thing, if you don't mind, we can put them in an email or something later if you rather do that.
Yeah, possibly. I definitely have really enjoyed this session, but I now need to go.
Yeah, okay. I've got 2 hours. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll take a record of all the chat and questions and circulate it, and we'll see what we can do answering them. But there's all, yeah, for Farah as well, quite a few technical ones. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. It's been really excellent to show these projects. We're very keen to have exactly this kind of thing, and I look forward to having an in-person meeting on the same topics later in the year, when it's deemed sort of safe to have a more group in-person meeting. Okay, Sandra, do you want to add anything as we wrap up?
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much to all the experts that we have here today on the panel for giving their expertise and their very valuable time to enlighten us all on what is happening currently here in the GCC. And thank you all very much to everyone who's joined us from everywhere across the world to try and get to understand and find out much more about this highly critical topic, which every one of us needs to equip ourselves with to better address. So thank you all.
Thank you. We thought there may be some misconceptions about what goes on in the Gulf of building and things and sustainability. So we're really keen to show the best examples of what is being built right now. And hopefully we'd like these projects maybe shown in a more full-on session later in the year through similar format. This is coming under sustainability series, but to really show the architecture and all the aspects of the design would be a great opportunity as well. So yes, if everybody stay tuned for that, will be announced through RIBA emails and website and things. And also always we keep things open to all and free. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for time, for 2 hours of your time on a UK afternoon and evening here. Thank you, Farah.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Gulf Chapter.
Thank you.
Yeah,
for
and this,
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Andy.
thank you. It's been
Bye, Chris.
recorded and it will eventually be circulated from the RIBA website. It'll just take a few weeks. Thank you.